Jordan and Gretzky, Serena and Ruth. Remembering great ones is easy to do. But what about the no-names who spent their whole lives long-snapping footballs and catching sack flies? They're guys, remember that guy. Remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy. They're just gonna remember some guys now.
Toilets! 1,160 toilets and urinals, 3 times the NBA average number of toilets and urinals. We do not want people waiting in line. We want to get them back to their damn seats at the end of Remember That Guy, the show where we mine our memories for nuggets of nostalgia about peripheral players past and present. Hello there, folks. Me, James, and unfortunately, we do not yet have Steve Ballmer's porcelain-filled palace Intuit Dome yet, so we are in the bathroom line, but I am not alone here.
Diaz also waiting to get through this line, and we have a very special guest with us. It's a man that knows a whole lot about streaming, but not the bathroom kind, the online kind. Please introduce yourself.
I tried to see if I could do the Kawhi laugh based on just the image of Kawhi looking on as Ballmer was loving talking about his toilets. I realized my throat does not make those noises, but, regardless, it is me, the very special guest Xavier.
Just a fun-loving guy, like Kawhi Leonard. Speaking of loving fun, Xavier, that actually has nothing to do with this. Hey, anything making memories for you right now?
So, we have just found out about the Panthers trading for the number 1 overall pick.
Live breaking news on this podcast you'll listen to on Monday, but we just learned minutes ago.
But, no, I do want to say, Aaron McKee, I love you. You did a lot for Temple. I think this is probably the end. Your first 2 years, you had all the COVID stuff going on. I thought, it's fine. It's fine. He'll get it. And then last year, 17-12, looks like finally turning the corner. This is going to be the year, getting back to the tournament for the first time in 5 years. This team is so consistent in its ability to be inconsistent. 16-16, losing to some of the worst teams in all of college basketball, being one of 2 teams to beat number 1 Houston all season long, along with number 4 Alabama, and then losing by 30 in their first game of the American Athletic Conference tournament. It just he's not got the balance of the team right. There's been personnel issues. He hasn't recruited well. As much as I love him, I think it's probably time to see if someone else is the answer. And Arthur Johnson did not hire McKee, so he's got no loyalty to him. It wouldn't surprise me if he's gone in a couple days.
One of the bad losses you're referring to, I do want to at least give a shout out. Maryland Eastern Shore men's basketball is having their best season in like 30 years. They are having, by their standards, a great year. Temple should never lose to them, but that should be acknowledged. I think the perfect microcosm of how disappointing the Temple season this is to start off Big 5 play by upsetting Nova for, I think, the first time since our freshman year.
Yeah,
I think that was the last time we beat Nova. So it had been a decade. And you start off Big 5 play like that. You take care of St. Joe's. You take care of LaSalle. All you got to do is beat Penn, and you lose by 20.
You also lose to Wagner at home.
And you lose to Wagner. But hey, shout out the NEC. Another great conference that I love very much.
You can't let the nerds beat up on you like that, though. Those Quakers should not be putting a 20-point margin on you.
Exactly. Like if they run a slow, calculated offense and they grind out like a 54-50 victory, we can live with that. Nobody from Penn should be putting up 77 on Temple. And I love Penn too. I love all the Philly schools, but not great.
Not a great year for all Philly schools. The first time in however long that not a single Philly school makes the NCAA tournament unless Penn does something crazy.
They just got to win 2 in a row.
It's been tough. A tough time to be a Temple fan of any sport. So, we'll see what happens, but I think it's probably time for a change. On more positive notes, it was really fun watching Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, and Breece Hall do a live video of them burning the cheesehead to make what they called cheese sauce in an attempt to lure Aaron Rodgers out of the darkness to the Jets. I don't want to have to rely on Rodgers and luring him with cheese sauce, but you know what? This is the only hope I have at this point.
Is that considered an effigy, or is it just a fondue?
It's only an effigy if it is from the effigy region of the United States. Otherwise, it's just a burnt likeness. No, I mean, I'm all for the satanic rituals to bring him into New York for you, Xavier. It is something you're so unexcited for that there is a part of me that feels like something's finally got to go your way when you're not getting hyped about the Jets at all. So really, the fact that you are so down on this is what fills me with hope on your behalf. And I hope that when you said the other day you guys are going to give up, what, a first, a second next year, and then pay him $40 million a year, that's not that bad. If that's your worst case scenario for 2 years, Aaron Rodgers, that's fine.
Since then, I did see all these like Sports Illustrated and whatever, like only anonymous executives and what they thought fair price would be, and it was like 2 third-round picks or a third and a fifth, depending on if you're going to pay. I'm like, well, that just makes it worse because I know we're going to give up way more than that. I do want to go back real quick, though, because I just saw that the last time Temple won an NCAA tournament game, Diaz, I think you might have been there with me watching this at a Temple watch party. It's when they beat NC State.
2012.
11 years ago.
This would have been right before the Illinois game.
Indiana.
That they didn't lose, right?
Game.
Indiana game. Yeah, with Zeller and Oladipo.
National Player of the Year and National Defensive Player of the Year, Victor Oladipo, had 0 answers for Khalif Wyatt all afternoon, and Scooty Randall went 0 for 10 and missed 5 layups.
It was 0 for 11.
It was more. It was.
He didn't make a shot. Yeah, it started with a 0.
It definitely started with 0. I remember that.
It's been that long since we've gotten an NCAA tournament win. We had that loss to Iowa on that putback. We had that loss to Belmont
which was an offensive foul.
It was, but they didn't call it.
Let's set that record straight. That was 1,000,000% a push off on the Iowa dude.
It has been a long time for a team that was used to being there every single year and winning. So hopefully Temple will be good at some point. But back to the Jets. I don't know what to hope for. I don't know what to expect. It'll be interesting. But you know what? I'm not the only person who has confused feelings about their favorite football team. James, how about you tell us what's making memories for you?
Let me be clear. None of my feelings about my football team are confused whatsoever. Let me just start by saying that there is no confusion.
They're crystallized.
Before we get to the Ravens, real quick, let's talk Spurs for just one moment. So the Spurs had a franchise-worst 16-game losing streak this season. On that 16th game, they actually lost by 16. In fact, their average margin of loss during that 16-game losing streak was 16 points, which is a pretty bad showing on a night-by-night basis. However, allow me for a moment to adopt the personality of that one guy from the rehearsal who is all about numbers showing up and stuff, because in 2019, for France in the Under-16 FIBA World Championship, Victor Wembanyama did wear 32, and if you divide 32 by 2, it is 16. So I just want to make sure that that's on everyone's minds now that the Spurs finally snapped that streak exactly at 16. Beautiful things coming in the future. Which is good because will help me wash out the rancid taste of rooting for a team engaged in a rank and obvious attempt at price fixing, because Lamar Jackson has been tagged by the Ravens with the non-exclusive franchise tag. He is only the 4th ever quarterback to get a non-exclusive franchise tag, meaning essentially that people can still offer him a contract and the Ravens can just match any contract that anyone does. Do you guys know any of the other quarterbacks, just while we have a moment?
Matt Castle?
Matt Castle is one, yes. There's one that I think both of you should be getting.
I got Matt Castle.
You got Matt Castle. Matt Castle surprised me. The fact that neither of you got Kirk Cousins also surprised me. He had the double tag, which is why he had to have it. Drew Brees, by the way, is the other one. Drew Brees when he was with the Chargers. Okay. All of those guys, if they were not traded the offseason they were given the non-exclusive franchise tag, did then immediately leave in free agency the following year because, frankly, it's a pretty insulting thing to do to a franchise quarterback. It is saving the Ravens about $13 million, bringing Lamar Jackson from what would have been the 4th highest AAV in the NFL all the way down to the 9th behind. I should clarify, I took this actually before Daniel Jones's contract was signed, so I imagine that Lamar Jackson is now the 10th highest paid quarterback in the NFL because Daniel Jones is making $45 million a year. But that's not what the Ravens are concerned about. They're not concerned about the AAV. They're concerned about the fact that the Cleveland Browns gave a sex criminal who also sometimes plays football, Deshaun Watson, a fully guaranteed, 5-year, $230 million contract, largest fully guaranteed contract ever. And every single other owner hates Cleveland's guts now because no one wants to be offering that money to anybody because they could instead keep that money and be slightly richer. We've talked about how Lamar was potentially going to another team and how I was very, very sad about this because he's the greatest player to ever put on a Ravens uniform. And I was very nervous that someone like Atlanta would make a play or someone else. 2:30 on the deadline for franchise tag day was the time that the news came out. It's going to be a non-exclusive. At 3:16, we have news that Atlanta is officially out. At 3:35, we have news that the Raiders are out. At 4:30, we have news that Carolina's out. 4:49, Washington. 5:22, the Dolphins. That means in 3 hours, 5 teams had all just decided, yeah, no, we're not even going to make a play for a former unanimous MVP at the age of 26, where all we have to do is find a contract that he likes and presumably send over 2 first-round picks. Also essentially offering him a contract that the Ravens do not want to match by offering him the guaranteed money he's asking for. Everyone very quickly realized, oh, this is collusion, isn't it? This is all the owners meeting up in some smoky back room and deciding we're not going to give this guy his contract, and so we're going to have the Ravens do this tag. And when no one offers him the money he wants, he'll crawl back to the Ravens, and we'll have reset the market after that whole sex crimes with the Deshaun Watson thing. I just don't want anyone to forget that the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns is a horrifying predator. Anyway, people started to try and backpedal a little bit. By 7:10, we got news that the Raiders hadn't eliminated any quarterback options because, the team that is too fucking poor to fire their dog shit coach they hate is definitely going to offer a giant guaranteed contract to Lamar Jackson. But with that, with Houston staying pretty at the number 2 pick, with this news of Carolina moving up, with the Jets probably getting Aaron Rodgers, maybe Indianapolis makes a play for him, but clearly the league has spoken. I fucking hate this. I am disgusted by the Ravens organization and all of football right now. I hope Lamar Jackson gets a lot of money. I just want to go climb into Aaron Rodgers' now unoccupied dark hole and hide.
Yeah, it's not great.
It's not great. It's not a good thing. Not a great time. I hate it.
I think the thing that hurts the most about this is that we know that the Ravens management is going to win here. It just feels inevitable that they're going to win despite being terrible about it. And we know that it's collusion. We know that it's wrong, but it's going to work out for them, which sucks.
It will absolutely work out for them this season. I would argue with the definition of the word win long-term, because it certainly doesn't seem like this is going to benefit their long-term relationship with the greatest player to ever put their jersey on. And it's biased, sure, but as far as I'm concerned, Lamar Jackson's the greatest football player I've ever seen. Full stop.
Let's dive in there real quick because
sure.
Ray Lewis, greatest Raven of all time. Not anymore.
Ray Lewis was not a better football player than Lamar Jackson. Here's what it is. It's like you could say Frank Robinson is the greatest baseball player to ever put on an Orioles jersey. And I think that's pretty true. I think Frank Robinson over his entire career is probably more talented than anyone else that put on an Orioles jersey. You could also argue that either Brooks Robinson or Cal Ripken or hell, Eddie Murray or Jim Palmer, if you want to get crazy, was a more significant Oriole. And maybe I wouldn't say Lamar Jackson is the most significant Raven of all time. Certainly he was not part of 2 different Super Bowl winning teams. That being said, yes, I think I'd call him the greatest Raven of all time. There is no other player for this team that I have ever enjoyed watching as much. We've watched a lot of good defenses here in Baltimore, and we'll tell you, it's great to watch a good, hard-nosed defense every week, and sure, to some extent it is. But now that I've gotten to see what it's like when you actually have a fun offense that you enjoy watching on that side of the ball, we were lying to ourselves for a very, very long time. That's much better than good defense.
Or
it's not
Ed
particularly
Reed.
Close. Ed Reed, I would say, is a more talented player than Ray Lewis. If I was saying talented players, he is at worst third, because the one person I might put above Ed Reed is Justin Tucker if we're talking about talented at their position.
Justin Tucker, the most talented Raven of all time, is a take I'm willing to throw my entire weight behind.
If we are talking about positional value, the gap between Justin Tucker and the next best kicker is greater than the gap between any other Ravens player ever. Yes, I will say that right now.
Too many superlatives. Justin Tucker's the greatest Raven of all time, period. That's all we need.
See, that's why we're a team. That's why we're a team, yes. Speaking of teamwork, I need you to bring it home for us, Diaz, by telling us what is making memories for you. God, let it be something good, please.
So it's good, it's bad, it's everything that we love about sports. So we're recording this on Friday. From Tuesday through Thursday, I was in Atlantic City helping to produce the men's and women's MAAC basketball championships. We had first round action, and then we had the quarterfinals. They're bringing in the big trucks for the semis and the finals. Iona women won a tight one today, so they're going to end up advancing to the conference championship game. They're going to face off against the Manhattan Jaspers. So we're going to get Iona, who is the number 1 seed, and the Manhattan Jaspers, the number 6 seed, advancing to the women's championship.
I'm going to do some quick research here because I need to know where Manhattan Jaspers comes from.
The Jaspers and the Lady Jaspers, excuse me. We do need to gender our Jaspers.
The Jaspers nickname comes from Brother Jasper of Mary, who is a memorable figure at the college, head of residence studies, athletic directors, and baseball coach during the late 1800s. Back when this college still annually played the New York Giants in baseball.
Well, there's
Hold on. The Manhattan Jaspers are credited by the Baseball Hall of Fame with the practice of the 7th inning stretch coming from them into Major League Baseball. Brother Jasper noticed the Manhattan students were becoming restless and edgy as Manhattan came to bat in the 7th inning of a close game. To relieve the tension, Brother Jasper called timeout and told the students to stand up and stretch for a few minutes until the game resumed.
Now, hold on. Now, there's that story, but the story that I always heard wasn't like it was a president was at a game and got up between the top and bottom of the 7th inning. Like, I've always heard that story. He got up.
That is a story for William Howard Taft, who is famous not for being the only president to also serve on the Supreme Court, but for being kind of fat. He was sore from prolonged sitting at a game between the Washington Senators and the Philadelphia Athletics. However, that's April 14th, 1910. We are talking about June 1882 if the Manhattan College one is true. Now, did Taft help popularize it? Certainly. There's no dispute here. But I think we got to give it up to the Manhattan Jaspers for inventing the 7th inning stretch. And for that reason, fuck Iona. Go Manhattan.
Go Manhattan. Would love to see Manhattan go. D.D. Davis, a great slashing point guard for the Manhattan Jaspers, but they had quite a scare in round 1 of the MAAC Women's Championship. In the first round, they were going against the 11th seed, and there are 11 teams in the MAAC. So they go against the 11th seed out of 11, St. Peter's Peacocks. You may remember the St. Peter's Peacocks men's team had that incredible run to the Elite Eight last year, and the women's team was looking to replicate some of that magic this year. If the St. Peter's women were to go on a run, it would dwarf what the men's team did last year because St. Peter's women's basketball entered the MAAC tournament with 0 wins for the entire season.
Oh, so that's why they were 11th ranked out of 11. There weren't any like tiebreakers that came into play or anything.
There were no tiebreakers. They entered at 0-29, 0-20 in conference play. But there's more to this team than meets the eye. Their head coach, Jennifer Leadham, hails from England, where she represented England at the 2009 University Games. She had a successful career playing collegiately at Franklin Pierce. She brought her sister aboard, Johanna Leadham Warner, who is the greatest player in English women basketball history. And when Jennifer accepted the job, St. Peter's women's basketball team had 4 players on the roster. Now, you may know famously that basketball is played with 5 players on the court. She did not have enough women to field a team when she accepted the job. This is a very just scrapped together team. Got some transfers in, multiple freshmen. And I got to tell you, when I'm working a broadcast, I never root for either team. You play it right down the middle. That's the way you have to do it. But god damn it, I was rooting for the St. Peter's Peacocks so fucking hard in this game. They immediately went down, but they surged back in the first half. They got a buzzer-beating layup at the end of the first half. They were up 3 going into halftime. They led the entire second half. There was a point where, I believe it was Jada Leonard, but a player for St. Peter's banked in a 3 as the shot clock was expiring to put them up 5 with about 4 minutes left. And that's the moment when you thought, holy shit, they're really going to do it. Manhattan took their first lead of the second half with 30 seconds remaining. They would not relinquish it and ended their season with a 59-56 loss to make it 0-30. Now, I produced 14 games in 3 days. We saw some incredible games. St. Peter's men's team, they're trying to do it again. By the time you listen to this episode, they will have done it or not done it. They're playing number 10 Marist. So the 11 seed and the 10 seed are playing in one semifinal on the men's side. Iona's Rick Pitino, the 1 seed, is looking to get back to the NCAA tournament. He's going against the number 5 seed, Niagara Purple Eagles. Would either of you like to guess who the Niagara Purple Eagles head coach is?
Ooh, my uncle went to Niagara.
Get a former team, because it's clearly a former player, I assume.
He played at Duke.
Christian Laettner?
Not
Gabe
Christian
Williams.
Laettner. Not Gabe Williams. It's your favorite former Duke point guard turned Syracuse quarterback, Greg Paulus.
Ooh, that is a good one. God damn.
He's in his 4th year as head coach. So a player that Rick Pitino went against when he was coaching Louisville. He's going to meet him in that one semifinal. But I digress. It's been an amazing tournament on both the men's side and the women's side. But to see a team that had the odds stacked against it, 0-29, you could have easily just rolled in and said, fuck this season. We're just going to lay here. We're going to roll over and we're going to take the short trip back to Jersey City. They played their fucking asses off, and Jennifer Leadham has a fan in me for the rest of her career. I certainly would hope that the St. Peter's administration has a long view here, recognizes that the fact that she even fielded a roster was an accomplishment in and of itself. They had a lot of close calls during the season. That first win's coming, and I certainly hope to see the St. Peter's Peacocks flying again soon, and really going to be paying attention to that women's team and the job that Jennifer Leadham does to build them back up.
Do peacocks fly?
Mark Wahlberg says it in a movie. I don't believe they do, actually.
I look forward to her trying to slowly dig her all-time win percentage out of a Brett Brown-sized hole.
Great pool. No, yeah, Brett. Somebody did it. It was like Brett Brown would have had to have the greatest season in NBA history 4 years in a row to get back to 500.
This is part of why I think Pop is largely handling this season so well. Is you're going to look at that all-time win-loss at the end of it and be like, what do you mean he had a tanking year?
It was 20 years of 50-plus wins in a row?
Every single year that Tim Duncan was on, at the very least, we won 50, except for the strike-shortened season when we went 37-13.
Yeah,
not that I've recited that stat before.
And what happened that season?
Oh, we won the title over the Knicks. I wasn't going to bring it up, Xavier. No, you don't get to make me feel bad about that. I was moving on. I was about to say, Diaz.
You know what? It's not going to make you feel bad because I was going to set you up for that anyway later on today.
Well, Diaz, you were in AC, but you were so busy, you weren't able really to benefit financially from AC in the way that many people often do. But as I understand it, we do want to talk about people with that kind of wherewithal for personal enrichment today.
Absolutely. So I think a subcategory of guys that I personally love is the bag getters. We're looking at guys that have pay that, when we look back on their career, is probably disproportionate to their production. Or, as you kind of alluded, James, there's certain guys too that get the bag in more creative ways. I want to talk about perhaps the most famous example of that within the professional baseball ranks. The man who retired in 2001, but to this day is still getting the bag for his professional baseball career. Talking about Roberto Martin Antonio Bonilla, a.k.a. Bobby Bonilla.
Orioles legend, Bobby Bonilla.
Hey, Bobby Bonilla made an All-Star game.
He was on the 1996 ALCS team. Bobby Bonilla was a productive Oriole, which is why I won't blow the Orioles spot up too much, but they are not blameless in many of the things you will be discussing today.
Well, the first thing I just want to say off the jump, Bobby Bonilla, happy Bobby Bonilla Day. It's become such a meme at this point. Bobby Bonilla was good at baseball. Bobby Bonilla was a very good baseball player. 6-time All-Star, Won the World Series in 97 with the Marlins. 3-time Silver Slugger Award winner in 88, 90, and 91. So, like, dude could play. Dude wasn't just out here, like, they're not, the money he's getting was earned. Let's be very clear about that, I guess is how I want to say that. Bobby Bonilla, a native of the Bronx, so somewhat tragic that he never gets to play for the Yankees, I'm sure. But he grows up in the Bronx. He goes to Herbert H. Lemon High School, and he graduates in 1981. He was hoping to get picked up in the Major League Baseball draft, but gets passed over in each of the 87 rounds that they have in the MLB draft. It's not actually that many, but I like hyperbole. He instead went to the New York Institute of Technology. He spent a semester there playing baseball, but mostly focused on pursuing a degree in computer science.
What was computer science like at that point?
I mean, half of it was like lugging around how big those fucking computers were. Like,
I know how to file the punch cards that go into this thing.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like there's still like a very tangible part to computer science at the time, I'm sure.
I know how to play Pong.
If there's any computer science experts that want to come on and clarify that period, please let us know. But he's pursuing his degree, and somehow he ends up in Europe. He's at a baseball camp in Europe. He gets spotted by a scout for the Pittsburgh Pirates with a great name, Sid Thrift.
An appropriate one for a Pirates scout.
Sid Thrift, Sid with a Y, to be very specific. And from the time that he signs, he's very quickly ascending up through the minor league ranks. In spring training of 1985, he's poised to finally break through into the big league club when he breaks his right leg on a collision in the field with Bip Roberts, another just amazing name in the story of Bobby Bonilla. And getting back to our favorite numbered rule draft in baseball, it's not the first, the second, the third, the fourth. It is the Rule 5 draft that we love. And via that Rule 5 draft, the Chicago White Sox take a chance on Bobby Bonilla. Starts off ho-hum with the White Sox. 75 games, he hits 269, nice, with a 715 OPS. But there's something that's really rubbing Sid Thrift wrong. He's not happy that his guy got jacked. But as we know, like if the White Sox want to keep him, that's kind of it. Like if they want to send him back through waivers, then they could get him back. But the other thing that Sid Thrift can do is he can try to convince the GM to make a trade to bring him back, which is pretty easy for him to do because at this point, Sid Thrift has risen to be the Pirates GM. So he's going to go ahead and trade for Bobby Bonilla, and this is going to bring Bobby Bonilla back where it all started. Also during this time, he played for the Indios de Mayagüez in the Puerto Rican Baseball League. So shout out Bobby Bonilla. Puerto Rican by heritage, born in the Bronx, but still going home to play some baseball. Bonilla finishes out the 86 season with the Pirates. Not too well. He only hits 240 with them, but this sets the stage for him to now be back home, feel comfortable. Bobby Bonilla, as I mentioned, has the 3-time Silver Slugger, 88, 90, 91. The one thing Bobby Bonilla was not was a good fielder. In two seasons,
so let's just put him at the hot corner?
In his first 2 seasons, would either of you like to guess how many errors he committed?
I mean, 69.
Xavier?
54.
James is closest, but if we're going by Price is Right rules, unfortunately, James, you lose. 67. Again, only if we're doing Price is Right rules. That has never been established. But Jim Leyland very quickly was like, all right, we need this bat in the lineup because while he's committing those errors, he hits 300 his first season, full season with the Pirates. Drops to 274 and 88, but he has an 832 OPS his first year, 842 the second year. He's an all-star in 88. He gets his first Silver Slugger, rounded it out with 24 homers and 100 RBI. So his bat is just too valuable. So they're going to move him to right field where he's going to fill out a dominant lineup with Andy Van Slyke and, of course, pre-steroids Barry Bonds. Which, again, it bothers me so much because Barry Bonds was one of the greatest baseball players of all time before taking steroids. Like, he didn't have to do it. He didn't have to taint his legacy. It's tragic.
Maybe he just
ultimately.
really enjoyed injecting himself with stuff and just couldn't break the habit.
Yeah, if they'd been able to find some non-steroid stuff, or I guess like non-heroin stuff to put in needles, he would have been all for it. But it's just like there's only so many options. It's one of those two, and you can still play baseball on steroids.
So, from that perspective, Barry Bonds a hero. Very smart decision being made.
Anti-drug king, Barry Bonds.
So, dare I say on that topic?
Fuck you.
Fucking terrible.
But no, so Bobby Bonilla is arguably as good, dare I say, as Barry Bonds.
What a time to be alive.
From 88 to 91, he makes the All-Star each of those seasons. He picks up his 3 Silver Sluggers. In 90 and 91, he finished top 3 in MVP voting. He finished second in 1990. That MVP went to Barry Bonds. And in 91, when he finished third, that MVP went to Terry Pendleton. Barry Bonds finished in second. Again, just to further the point that this is a formidable outfield combination. They claim 3 straight NL East titles from 1990 to 1992. Bonilla led the league in extra base hits in 1990. Just remarkable seasons. But it comes time for his contract to run out. And as we discussed with Mr. Flood, enemy number 71 of Philadelphia, free agency exists in Major League Baseball. So Bobby Bonilla becomes a free agent, and he's going to go ahead and sign a 5-year, $29 million contract with the New York Mets. This contract that he signed did make him the highest paid player in the National League.
Oh, it made him the highest paid player in baseball.
By a good margin.
When you mentioned Bobby Bonilla, I remembered that he was at one point the highest paid player. And so I just wanted to look and see and remind myself who in 1992 he's making more money than. Do you mind if I interject with this for a moment?
Please do.
So here's a partial list of some of the people that he is making more money than. Dwight Gooden and Danny Tartable, whoever the fuck that is. I'm sorry, I don't know who Danny Tartable is. I have gaps in my knowledge, but those are the 2 closest. After that, you've got Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, MVP Cal Ripken is making less. I don't even see where he is on this list, which is not great. He's going to be much further down, right behind Nolan Ryan, Greg Maddux, Eddie Murray, new Hall of Famer Fred McGriff, Darryl Strawberry, Rafi Palmeiro, Barry Larkin. This is a very good time for baseball. Frank Thomas. All of these people making less money than Bobby Bonilla.
They should have had better agents.
They should have had better agents, but listen, Bobby Bonilla, elite bag getter, despite the fact that he finished his career with only 45 stolen bases, caught 57. Still a great bag getter. Signs with the Mets, again, highest paid player. His production starts to fall off a little bit. He still makes 2 All-Star games in 1993 and 95. He hits his career high mark with 34 home runs in 93. But the most interesting thing about his time with the Mets in this first tenure is his relationship with that ever so famous and loving and caring and understanding New York media. He said in his introductory press conference, "I know you all are going to try, but you're not going to be able to wipe the smile off my face."
Oh, Bobby, you should have known better, Bobby.
So, of course, as soon as he says that and his production starts to fall off, very contentious relationship with the media. But I think the funniest thing to come out is that it wasn't just with the media. It was also with the official statisticians. There's one time during this first stint with the Mets that, that they had the phone to call to the bullpen. They still have that phone. That is a functioning phone. You can dial out to anywhere. You can dial to the bullpen. You can dial to the concession stand. You can dial up to the official scorer in the middle of the game and say, "Why did you charge me with an error for that? That was not an easy play," which is exactly what Bobby Bonilla did. During a game, he picked up the bullpen phone and dialed up to the press box to complain about the error he was assessed. It is objectively funny. I put it up there with the Nick Young turnaround 3-pointer that he rimmed out. We need to just appreciate when it is truly funny. But after a few years of that, in 1995, the Mets and Bobby figure it's best to go our separate ways, which is when he is traded to the Baltimore Orioles for a player to be named later. That player would be named a month later. His name is Jimmy Williams.
There were other, I believe, combined Orioles and Chunichi Dragons legend Alex Ochoa is also involved somewhere in there.
Right. So Bonilla was sent to the Orioles with a player to be named later. That player would be Jimmy Williams. The Orioles would send back Damon Buford and Alex Ochoa.
Alex Ochoa, what a beaut. Hey, did you guys watch the 9th inning of the Japan-Korea just absolute blowout where my boy from the Dragons, Hiroto Takahashi, because they didn't run rule, Korea did get a single inning of action, baby.
The Korean players look so disheartened.
When it was about to be mercy ruled because of a combination of a bases loaded walk and wild pitch in the 7th inning, just gutting.
It was so close to a grand slam to walk off mercy rule it, which would have been hilarious.
But you know who never played in a World Baseball Classic? Unfortunately, because it would have been for Puerto Rico, probably making you guys very happy, is Bobby Bonilla.
Crazy that it took them so long to come up with the World Baseball Classic, right? Like, hey, this is like probably the second most beloved across many different countries sport behind soccer. Maybe we should have a tournament for it. It's crazy that it took the World Baseball Classic so long to exist. I'm glad that it does now. All that being said, during his stint with the Orioles, as you alluded earlier, James, he helps them to make it to that 1996 ALCS. Bonilla hits 287 that year with an 853 OPS, 28 dingers, 116 RBI. Pretty good season. The year after this, though, he's going to go ahead and sign with his first manager, Jim Leyland, who is now managing 1997 Florida Marlins. That, of course, was the Marlins team that went on their incredible run through the wild card rounds, up through, and to win the World Series. Bobby Bonilla, a key player for that team, hitting in the 5-hole, averaged 297 with an 846 OPS, 17 dingers, and 96 RBI that year.
And as I feel like I must always point out when we're in this position, if I had a nickel for every time the Marlins got a wild card spot and then went on a crazy run all the way to make the World Series and then blew the team up, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it is weird that it's happened 2 times.
The period before the Phillies won a World Series where I had to live in a world where the Florida Marlins, a team that existed for like 10 years, had more
did
World
not yet
Series,
have a division title.
And did not yet have a division title, had won more World Series than my fucking existing since 1888 ass Philadelphia Phillies.
And it's all because that one umpire, Livan Hernandez, hit 15 strikeouts on pitches that were all like 6 feet outside the box.
Truly one of the most atrocious performances in umpiring history. Who was it? It was like a known umpire that was back there. I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Eric
now that
Gregg.
I said that it's a guy.
Eric Gregg.
Can never trust a motherfucker with 2 first names. You can trust a motherfucker named Bobby Bonilla, though. You can trust that he's gonna get the bag wherever he goes. 98 Marlins season. Gets off to a slower start, only hitting 278 through 18 games when he is traded to the Los Angeles Dodgers. Now, there are quite a few guys that are involved in this transaction. The Marlins send out Bobby Bonilla. They also send out Manuel Barrios, Jim Eisenreich, Charles Johnson, and Gary Sheffield. They get back Todd Zeile and Mike Piazza.
Ooh.
So quite the trade. Mike Piazza only spent that 1 half season with the Marlins, but Bonilla, he's away from the East Coast for the first time in his career, and this might be a big reason why he kind of falls off a cliff here with the Dodgers. Only hits 237 with a 675 OPS, 7 homers and 30 RBI in 72 games. It's not time for free agency, but it is time for him to pack his bags again. And now we're getting to the part of our story that everybody knows. In November of 1998, Bobby Bonilla is traded in exchange for Mel Rojas. The Mets sent Mel Rojas to the Dodgers for Bobby Bonilla. Bobby Bonilla is back with the Mets. He's going to have some clashes with the manager, Bobby Valentine. His play's not quite up to expectations, so he's feuding with Bobby Valentine over his playing time. This is the absurdity of this is best encapsulated when during that 1999 NLCS between the Mets and the Braves, Bobby Bonilla is not getting in the game, but it's a big game. It's very dramatic. It goes to extras in Game 6. Bobby Bonilla knows he's not going to be in, so he decides to go back to the clubhouse, and he's playing cards with one of his teammates, Ricky Henderson. So Bobby Bonilla and Ricky Henderson just in the clubhouse while their teammates are fighting for their playoff lives out on the field, just shooting the shit and playing cards. Obviously, this is kind of a breaking point. This is a point of no return in the relationship between the Mets and Bobby Bonilla. So they need to forever separate themselves, make sure that their two names are not associated ever again. So they grant him his release in 1999, but they still owe him $5.9 million. As we know, because of the great negotiating by the MLB Players Union, baseball contracts are fully guaranteed. There's no way out of it. You owe that money. The only exception would be if the team and the player were to reach an alternative agreement on compensation, which is exactly what happens here. Fred Wilpon, Mets owner, offered a deal to Bobby Bonilla, said, hey, 12 years, we're not going to pay you, but stay patient. Eventually, we're going to start paying you out $1.19 million every year, starting in 2011, concluding in 2035. That adds up to $29.8 million, as opposed to the $5.9 if it were to be a one-time payment. So quite the opportunity to secure the bag long-term for Bobby Bonilla. But the reason why Wilpon agreed to it was because this essentially weighs out to an 8% interest compounded that they're paying out on the Bobby Bonilla contract. Fred Wilpon was assured that he was going to get 10% returns on the investments that he made with Bernie Madoff, which did not happen.
Sigma Alpha Mu brother.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that too proudly, Xavier. They come up with this payment, and Fred Wilpon ends up eating a lot of shit on it for a lot of different reasons. But the thing that you may not know is that's not the only deferred payment that's going on.
No, it isn't, Diaz.
There's another one, James. Would you like to talk about that?
So you might know why. I admittedly have never been able to find what language in his contract led to this, but with the Baltimore Orioles, there was, I believe, some similar buyout following his time with us, because from the years 2004 until 2028, we are annually paying Bobby Bonilla $500,000, totaling $12 million altogether. So he's making 1.6 a year on July 1st, just doing jack shit.
Yeah, just straight up chilling.
These deferred payments are super popular now too. Devers, his extension that he just signed was deferred an extra 10 years, so his contract is through 2033. But then he gets $8 million a year from 2033 through 2043. I don't know, teams like this now. I guess it's just, hey, number go up because we will continue making money no matter how little we spend on our teams, so we can pay him in future and not now.
Sure. I mean, the second best paid Oriole this season is Chris Davis. He's making $9.1 million. The only Oriole making more than Chris Davis is Kyle Gibson. I'm not here to slander Bobby Bonilla. I'm thrilled that he gets his money. His 1.9 is more than almost everyone on the Orioles makes every single year. If you include the deferred payments for the Orioles, 2 of their top 5 highest players are Chris Davis and Alex Cobb.
You know what? Chris Davis deserves it, though. He deserves it for what he gave to the Orioles team.
Do you know how many seasons he hit under 200?
How many nickels would you have, James?
Diaz, I would have 3 consecutive nickels at the end, which is really what counts. The 2018 through 2020, that 2020, by the way, 115 average.
I think the average pitcher batted 130, 140 when that was a thing. While we were riffing there, I was trying to do research. I cannot find out why he is owed $500,000 every year by the Baltimore Orioles, but I did find some other fun deferred contracts that people may not be as familiar with. The first person to ever get an arrangement like this was Brett Saberhagen. He gets paid $250,000 a year every year starting from 2004 by the New York Mets, of course. Manny Ramirez. He's still receiving $5 million a year from the Red Sox through 2026. Ken Griffey Jr. still getting paid out by the Reds, getting 3.5.
Ken Griffey Jr. is still getting paid by Cincinnati.
Still getting paid out by the Reds. 3.59 million this year and next is still coming his way. And this will be the last year that Todd Helton will be paid out the 1.3 million that he is owed by the Colorado Rockies. So quite a few guys there. But I mean, the most famous example, again, Bobby Bonilla. His career didn't end there. He would sign with the Braves in 2000 to hit his third of the current NL East teams. Plays 114 games. He's largely a bench piece at this point of his career. He hits 255 with a 754 OPS. He will sign with the Cardinals the following year. Again, mostly just a bench piece. Plays in his final game on October 7th, 2001, finishing the season with a 213 average, 5 homers, 21 knocked in. Overall, Bobby Bonilla finishes his career with 6 All-Star appearances, those 3 Silver Sluggers, a championship, 2010 hits, 287 homers, and 1,173 RBI. A very, very good career. Bobby Bonilla's lasting legacy, hopefully, will be his philanthropy. In 1992, Bobby and his wife Millie started the Bobby and Millie Bonilla Public School Fund. The fund benefits schools attended by Bonilla and his wife. They would contribute $500 for every run he batted in for the Mets, which is 243. No, that's walks. 295.
This is what happens after you spend multiple days in AC producing basketball. You forget other sports.
I mean, I have been staring at stat sheets and fun facts and game notes for about the past 72 hours. So it did take me a little bit.
The audience knows how tired Diaz is, but how committed he is to this podcast. That despite having no sleep, he's on here to talk about what he wants to talk about.
Which is guys.
Love talking about guys. Love talking about bags. Love talking about guys that get bags. Love pronouncing all of my words correctly. And that's why I'm in production and not on the mic, folks. But we digress. Bobby Bonilla, a much better baseball player than most people remember. Most people remember him just for getting the bag, but I think that is one of the most admirable qualities that we could ever look for in a guy. And I know what I'll be doing July 1st. Not making as much money as Bobby Bonilla.
That's very true.
Hey, you don't know that. You could win the lottery on July 1st.
I will win more money than Bobby Bonilla. I will make that distinction. But yeah, Bobby Bonilla, love a good alliterative name and love a guy that embarrasses the Mets by continuing to get the bag from them into how old he will be, because this goes through 2030. What did I say? 2035?
Yeah.
I believe he'll be 72.
In 2035, he will be 72. Incredible bag getting.
There's a lot to love about Bobby Bonilla. I'm ready to fall in love with someone else. And speaking of embarrassing the Mets, Xavier, why don't we turn to you to see who can do it next? You're the one who embarrasses the Mets, by the way, not whoever your guys. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll take it. So, as the three of us are aware, NBA salaries in the 90s and early 2000s were a lot lower than they are today. But, for our listeners, in 1996, the cap was $25 million, and Michael Jordan was only making about $4 million. Currently, the cap is $123 million, but thanks to cap rules, the Golden State Warriors are at about $200 million, with Steph Curry as the individual with the highest cap in the league at $48 million. So, by himself is making twice what the cap was in 1996.
Well, let it be said, Steph Curry's still underpaid. I don't know how much the Warriors franchise valuation has gone up since he got there, but it's certainly gone up by a larger multitude than the NBA cap has.
So I'm looking at the Charlotte Hornets payroll right now. How do you think that Michael Jordan feels when he has to sign a paycheck that's bigger than one that he was making annually for PJ Washington as the owner of the Charlotte Hornets?
You know what?
What goes through Michael Jordan's mind when he gives PJ Washington $5.8 million?
I'm sure he then looks at the checks he gets from the TV money for the NBA's TV deal and then goes and smokes a cigar and gambles a bit. But I mean, Jordan himself only made about like $80 million in his entire career, and almost all of that was in 2 seasons because he had the 2 seasons. What was like 98 and 99 when he just got $30 million, taking up the entire cap. But yeah, so Steph Curry currently making twice what the cap was in 96. With that context set, I want to talk about a guy who from the mid-90s to early 2000s maximized his earnings in a way that few others matched. Today, I want to talk about Brian Grant.
Brian Grant. Is
Yes.
that any relation to Horace Grant?
No.
Is the one Grant of all the Grants in the NBA that is not related to the other Grants?
This
Are Jeremy
Grant is
Grant
not
and Horace
related.
Grant related?
Yeah, Horace is his uncle.
So, okay, this is one of the things where, like, how I don't want to make a Danny and Donald Glover assumption or anything like that. But then sometimes, like, you see Marquise Brown and Antonio Brown, and they're like, no, actually, they are cousins.
We had a moment like that when we were covering the tournament yesterday. Sienna had a kid named McCollum, and I said he's definitely not related to CJ, and I was right. And Niagara had a kid named Billups, and I said instantly, he looks a little bit like Chauncey. They're cousins.
So insular, this sport.
I love basketball families.
But you're saying we have an outsider here in Brian
Yes,
Grant.
this is an outsider. So Brian Grant was born on March 5th, 1972 in Columbus, Ohio. Happy belated 51st birthday, Brian. He grew up in a small rural community of Georgetown, Ohio, near the Ohio River, about 40 miles southeast of Cincy. And when I mean rural, I mean during summers he spent most of his time working at farms, cutting housing and stripping tobacco, and also digging potatoes and baling hay. That was his summer activities.
Like, exclusively the kind of things that we have large-scale agricultural machinery to do now.
Yes, but, they still love having underpaid teenagers and immigrants who can't get any other jobs do it. So, Grant played basketball at local Georgetown High. Very little fanfare, as you may expect from a farm town kind of in the middle of nowhere, until Xavier University's basketball office started receiving anonymous phone calls saying, hey, you should check this kid out. And they kept getting anonymous phone calls and messages saying, hey, check this kid out, until they finally sent an assistant coach over to take a look. This assistant coach watches him once and calls head coach Pete Gillen to come over and watch him, and then they give him a scholarship offer. It's the first direct marketing.
I want to congratulate Deep Throat on being able to diversify their portfolio following all the Watergate stuff to get into the sports agent world as well. That's really impressive. CIA blowing up Richard Nixon's spot and now getting Brian Grant into Xavier University.
Well, so that was what I was going to ask. Like, is it part of this tale you're about to spin for us? Do we find out who the anonymous caller was?
We do not. Nobody knows, or at least no one has said who the. I tried to see. But
It's a time loop. You said the scout called when he got back there. The whole thing was a time loop, and it had been him the entire time. When he made the call at the end, that did. I've solved it. We can move on now.
Diaz, you probably should have thought about this. Back when you were leaving high school, you could have got a walk-on spot at Temple if you just started sending some anonymous messages to Al Golden.
Listen, I did once say to Aaron McKee on the way up to the pickup courts, because the basketball team offices were also located up there, I said, if you need a 5'11" three-point specialist, I'm your guy. And he didn't bring me on, and now we're at the potential breaking point with Aaron McKee. So all I'm saying is, Aaron, you would have given me
doors.
a chance. I could have been a contender.
So Brian Grant joins Xavier University, technically a local university for him, and quickly becomes their go-to center. As a freshman, averages 11.6 points and 8.5 rebounds on the Xavier team that won the Midwestern Collegiate Conference, precursor to the current Horizon League. This team makes the NCAA tournament, and in the tournament, Grant puts up a 15-10 double-double as they pull the 14-3 upset over Nebraska 89-84. Then puts up another double-double, but they do fall to UConn in the second round. Regardless, this freshman has had a fantastic season, and big things are expected going forward. Sophomore year doesn't actually work out as well. He has a little bit of an increase in efficiency, but team not nearly as successful. But comes back his junior year and puts up one of the best seasons in Xavier history. Averages 19 points, 9 boards, 2 assists, and 2 stocks while shooting 65% from the field. Midwestern Conference Player of the Year, honorable mention AP All-American. First round of the NCAA tournament. 9 seed Xavier gets a blowout win over 8 seed New Orleans, with Grant putting up 20 and 10 on 73% shooting. This sets up a matchup against overall number 1 seed Indiana. This was the Bob Knight Indiana, at this point led by Calbert Chaney, the consensus player of the year. And Indiana sets up to just double Grant the entire game. This forces him into one of his worst ever shooting performances, only going 5 of 13, but it frees up a lot of space for his teammates. He puts up 16 rebounds, 15 stocks, and Xavier takes Indiana right down to the wire, only losing the last couple seconds, 73-70. And I watched this game over the past couple days. It's wild to remember that the clock didn't stop after made baskets in the last minute at this point. So Xavier hits a 3 to make it 71-68 with 13 seconds left. And Indiana does not inbound the ball until there are 3 seconds left. Because nobody goes to the baseline to pick it up, and then they hold it as long as they can before inbounding. They waste 10 of the last 13 seconds of the game just while the ball is not in play, which is absolutely nuts to think about now.
The inverse of the Chris Webber situation.
Comes back, has another good senior season, and then gets drafted by the Sacramento Kings at number 8 overall in the 94 draft. Which, as a side note, is one of the most fun drafts there is when you look back on it. You got the Jason Kidd and Grant Hill weird shared rookie of the year. 2 Temple boys in the first round with the aforementioned Aaron McKee and Eddie Jones. And Heisman winner Charlie Ward.
I'm so sorry that Brian Grant got the worst out of all of this by ending up in fucking hell.
Hey, this was good Sacramento. They were not bad.
Don't delude yourself into bleeding such. I know that they had some playoff runs, but we've gone over this. There is no such thing as good Sacramento.
Because deals were kind of weird at this point, especially rookie deals, the reported info was that he signed a 13-year, $29 million contract with Sacramento. Probably not the best deal, but was better than what he said he was going to sign for initially, because after they drafted him at a press conference, he said that he only wanted $2.50, quote, enough for a Dr. Pepper and a bag of chips. He gets off to a strong start, averages 13 and 8 in his first season, makes all rookie team along with the aforementioned Kidd, Hill, and Jones. And after a strong second season, the Kings renegotiate his contract. So it goes from a 13-year, $29 million deal to a 5-year, $29 million deal with an opt-out after the first season. Has some injuries this season, limited to only 24 games, but does exercise his opt-out, which is a bit surprising. You'd think that he just renegotiated his contract and got more money per year and then didn't play at all, but he thought he could get more on the open market. The Kings did offer him a 7-year, $48 million deal. But instead, he decided to go a little further north. He signed a 7-year, $63 million deal with the Portland Trail Blazers, making him one of the highest paid players in the NBA.
The Blazers at that time were just an organization riddled with bad decisions.
Was this coinciding with this year explosion in cap numbers? Because that feels to me like even worse than a normal. That feels like a Timothy Mozgov contract where it's like, we have to do something with this money. Here you go, Brian Grant.
It's funny. I almost brought Timofey Mozgov, but didn't feel like talking about him for that long. But no, not really. So this was 1997, and the cap at this point was $27 million. So there was no big explosion.
A third of their annual cap on Brian Grant.
Brian Grant, yes.
All right.
On Brian Grant, who just only played a quarter of the season due to multiple knee injuries. But whatever the Trailblazers want, this is what they wanted. And so he comes in as the starting power forward. He actually played the entire season with a torn labrum, but he just never told the staff about it. Despite that, he had a good season. And then comes back the next year, 98-99, and averages a double-double. And the Trailblazers are good. They make the playoffs, Western Conference semis. They're matched up against Karl Malone and the Jazz, and it's essentially Grant versus Malone for the entire series. Game 5, Malone elbows Grant in the face in the first quarter, opening up a massive gash in his forehead. They have to take him out, take him to go get stitches, gets 6 stitches in his head, comes back a quarter later, and still leads the game in rebounding. Blazers eventually get past the Jazz.
Good. Okay, I didn't want to get too excited because if Karl Malone still won in the end, I was going to be disappointed. But yes, good.
They make it to the Western Conference Finals. James, I've already set you up for this once before. What happens in the Western Conference Finals in the 99 playoffs?
I'm not here to luxuriate in one of the greatest basketball dynasties of all time. Like, I wasn't a fan at that point. Do I enjoy getting to count the 5 rings that Tim Duncan and Greg Popovich won together? Sure. But, like, I'm trying to flaunt this.
Well, the Spurs
the Spurs
sweep
win.
them.
Yeah.
They sweep them, and that's the end of the Blazers season. And the end of Grant's starting spot with the Blazers. Despite his really good season, the Blazers have a young kid that they want to give more time to at the power forward position. His name is Rasheed Wallace, and they also traded for Scottie Pippen. Now, with Rasheed Wallace and Scottie Pippen, it pushes Brian Grant to the bench. He only averages 21 minutes off the bench, putting up 7 and 5. Again, the Blazers are good. They make it all the way to Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals against the Lakers, have a 16-point lead, and then blow it. So Grant, after the season, losing his starting position, only getting 21 minutes a game, he's like, all right, I have a good deal here, but I would love to start somewhere. Maybe I got to take a short contract, rehab my value, then get another big deal. I'm still young. The Miami Heat, with Pat Riley claiming Grant could be the missing piece for their championship run, signed him to a 7-year, $86 million contract after the 99 season. Again, the cap is only $34 million at this point.
It makes a lot of sense why the NBA caps deal length at 5 years now after hearing some of these numbers for Brian Grant.
And
Brian Grant at this point has technically signed deals that were 18, 25, 32 years in length, but he's only played about 7 years.
I also just want to say before we move on, pardon the pun, but Pat Riley does not catch enough heat for being largely not a great GM, and has just really benefited from one time convincing LeBron James to play with him and one time successfully drafting Dwayne Wade. Outside of that, we have found a lot of stupid Pat Riley decisions in doing this show.
Duncan Robinson contract.
I can't hate Pat Riley. I can't do it as much as I hate the Heat. I can't hate him. It's fine. It's not. He paid Brian Grant a lot of money, and that is what we're here to talk about. Brian Grant making a lot of money. Unfortunately for the Heat, weeks before this season starts, All-Star center and previous third-place finisher for the MVP, Alonzo Mourning, gets ruled out for most of the season with a rare kidney disease, focal glomerulosclerosis. And with that, they need to make Brian Grant their center. He responds by having his best season ever. He puts up 15 and 9 and is a very strong contributor on a very good Heat team. Mourning comes back in March, and they start switching their offense back to really focusing on Alonzo Mourning. The team responds by getting swept in the first round by 6-seed Charlotte. Now, I'm not saying that letting Grant continue to run the offense as center would have avoided that, but I'm not saying that.
There is certainly a hypothesis worth exploring there.
Grant starts for the Heat for a couple more seasons, puts up another double-double season in 02-03, and then on the 04 team with the young Dwayne Wade, has some major contributions, including a 16-rebound game in the conference semis against Indiana. But the Heat, at this point, want to move on. They think that they're, again, one piece away. So, after the 04 season, they trade Grant, along with a couple others in a first-round draft pick, to the Los Angeles Lakers for Shaquille O'Neal.
I did forget. I'm going to give Pat Riley that one also. I did forget about that one. I'm going to give him that, and Dwayne Wade and convincing LeBron James to take a large amount of money. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty good deal. And one of the other good things is it means that the Heat kind of get out of the very highly backloaded Brian Grant contract. At this point, he's owed $14 million a year, which the cap has gone up now at this point to $50 million. But still, he is taking up a third of the cap space for these teams. So the Lakers take on his giant contract now. And they just put him on the bench. Plays 16 minutes a game and averages 4 and 4. They're like, oh, we don't really need you. Just go sit over there making a ton of money. So they waive him, and he signs with the Suns. He does make a couple appearances with the Suns during their run to the Western Conference Finals in 2006. But then they don't really need him much either. So on draft day, they trade him and the rights to Rajon Rondo to the Boston Celtics for a future pick that became Rudy Fernandez. The Celtics are like, we also have no use for you. Despite all the money you're making, we'll just pay you to go away. And so they do waive Brian Grant, who then announces his retirement shortly afterwards. Overall, he played for around 12 seasons from 94 to 2006, starting 577 games. And even though most of his career was played in an era where the cap was under $40 million, in that time he earned $110 million in salary. Adjusted for just inflation and not, NBA inflation, that's $179 million in today's earnings. So if you add regular NBA inflation, this guy's a $300 million player off the bench in 2023.
If we're talking about what a proportional cap hit would be now. Okay.
Yes. So, I mean, he truly maximized getting a ton of money from a lot of different teams.
That's the thing that I was thinking is you're going to, Lakers are willing to take on this massive amount. Everyone's willing to waive him. They'll all pay for Brian Grant's services or to not have Brian Grant's services.
There were 3 different teams where he was taking up between a quarter to a third of the entire cap, despite never being an all-star. And, just being one of those reliable big men who, in the NBA, weirdly enough, it's cyclical. They always seem to either be overpaid or underpaid. It's like, hey, we got to give Ian Mahimi 4 years, $68 million. Or let's get a backup center for 1 year, $2 million. There's never any in between. But he was one of the first to really maximize that. And, as a true bag getter, he talked about getting the bag in his autobiography, which is aptly named Rebound. Talking about his love for Portland and Miami, he said, quote, I had all the perks that come with it, both materially and personally. Big houses in Portland, Miami, and a getaway cabin in the woods of Oregon, a fishing boat, a bank account fat enough that if I was smart, I'd never have to work again.
It's a big if, though. Very big if.
You know what? He was smart enough, and I do want to talk briefly about his post-NBA career, because after having some signs for years that he tried pushing through, in early 2009, Brian Grant was diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's disease at just 37. And since then, he has started the Brian Grant Foundation, which focuses on helping people with Parkinson's manage symptoms, maintain overall health, and prevent other serious illnesses. And he's partnered with people like Michael J. Fox to host fundraising events to spread awareness. He climbed Mount St. Helens with a group of people who also suffer from Parkinson's in 2012. And he just does a lot of, motivational speaking and charity work around Parkinson's, which I think is fantastic. It's definitely, not a way that everyone who gets diagnosed with an illness like that, especially at that age, would deal with it.
It is great to find out about this guy. He's like, look, all bad contracts, quote unquote, are fine. Every athlete should get paid as much as they can manage to convince someone to pay them. So there is no such thing, or there should not be such a thing as a bad contract. And to know that it's not just the giant names. There are sometimes these guys that fly under the radar, but are also managing to just carve out incredibly nice economic niches in the NBA ecosystem. It's great. Guy and Brandt.
Let's not get too ahead of ourselves there, James, because I just believe we still have one great candidate to talk about.
We have one more great candidate to talk about. Let me tell you what. In 1981, there was a movie called History of the World Part 1. I've been thinking about this recently because it's a Mel Brooks film, and Mel Brooks is releasing a miniseries sequel to it on Hulu, History of the World Part 2. And in general, thinking about Mel Brooks has had me thinking about a scene from Spaceballs, his send-up of the Star Wars franchise, 1987, for what it's worth. Excellent film. Absolutely love it. There is a scene in which Brooks, portraying the character of Yogurt, a send-up of Yoda, talks about the thing at the core of both the Star Wars and Spaceballs franchise, which is merchandising. It's all about merchandising. I want to talk about a guy who got that maybe better than any other guy has in the history of sports. It is a football player, number 87 in your programs, but number 1 on the special teams depth chart, strangely enough, and also number 1 in your hearts, I hope, Pat McInally.
Pat McInally.
Pat McInally.
He's got a good
glad
name.
that it's a great name. And I'm very glad there's no familiarity because you guys are going to trip learning about Pat McInally. He is phenomenal. And to begin, learning about John Patrick McInally, it's the full name, but we'll call him Pat. We need to go to Villa Park, California. There, on May 7th, 1953, he is born to Jack and Margaret, often called Peggy. This is in Orange County, the OC.
What you say?
Growing up, he is the perfect picture of a scholar athlete. He's like incredibly smart kid while he is at Villa Park High School. He is one of the Spartans. There are some incredible alumni from the Villa Park High School. We have Aaron Boone, manager of the Yankees, 2016 home run leader and Orioles legend Mark Trumbo, 2-time Oscar winner Kevin Costner, and the pièce de résistance. We have Ms. Friday herself, Rebecca Black.
Guy Day. Gotta get that. Guy Day.
Diaz either needs a beer or sleep at this point after that one.
¿Por qué no lo hacemos, my friend?
Well, getting down on those Guy Day night lights, Pat plays like every single sport while he is in high school. He plays volleyball, tennis, he's on the track and field team. In baseball, his freshman year, the only stat line I could find is that apparently he batted .320 with no singles. He was 6'1" as a freshman with this presumably astronomical slugging percentage. By his senior year, when he's playing basketball, he is 6'7", and he sets the record in the OC.
What you say?
For rebounds in a single game, 39. He is averaging on the season 23.5 to go with 21 points per game. So he's star basketball player, but also he's the star football player. He is the quarterback, the place kicker, and his senior year, he gets to do one other thing. It is a thing that is very near and dear to his heart, and that's punting. He has loved punting since he was 8 years old. He goes out and practices it with his dad every single day. Is like not stellar enough at it that they don't let him do it till his senior year, but just loves punting to death. And so he is doing all of this. He is an insane athlete, and USC, relatively local, they really want him. Coach John McKay keeps trying to call him, never gets any returns. Because it turns out that Peggy is screening all of the calls because she does not want Pat McInally to go, as he joked later, a non-accredited university, in reference to USC. No, she has her sights set on her son attending a very specific school, and that's Harvard. He's going to go be a Harvard man. He is initially planning on playing for the Harvard basketball team, but then his freshman year goes with some friends to the football tryouts just to like hang out. He never, ever even tries out for the basketball team. He's just sucked into the Harvard football team immediately, plays on their freshman team, and then as a sophomore, they're developing him into a wide receiver now. And in 9 games, it's very modest, 6 receptions and 78 yards, while also getting to contribute on special teams. His junior year, though, he is going to jump all the way to second in the country in receiving. In 9 games, he puts up 752 yards with a Harvard record 56 receptions. Again, this is a position he did not play at all before college. His senior year does dip a little bit to 655 receiving yards, still enough to become the 1974 New England Player of the Year. And in his final game, as like just this perfectly quintessential New England thing, it's the big game, the rivalry between Harvard and Yale. He has this massive trick play for his only successful collegiate pass. It is a 46-yarder that sets up a go-ahead touchdown. They win that game, giving them a share of the Ivy title. So it's a beautiful way to go out his senior year. Also, this senior year, much like high school, he was finally allowed to punt. He averaged 38.3 yards punting that senior year for Harvard. So he's finished college now. Let's just check in on the achievements. He had that 1974 New England Player of the Year, as we mentioned. He's also got the records in single games in Harvard for touchdowns, receptions, and yards. He has that record for a single season as well. He is also the all-time receiving yards leader for Harvard. And this is, Harvard's been playing football for a while. He is also an NFF National Scholar, and he is the first Harvard man to be named to the first-team All-American since a guy named Endicott Chubb Peabody in 1941.
I want to hear more about that guy.
We will someday revisit Endicott Chubb Peabody. He does actually have a kind of fun Wikipedia page, but I was locked into Pat McInally because I also found out that he graduated cum laude with a degree in U.S. history. So I'm all in on Pat McInally. And so are several teams in the lead up to the 1975 draft. So we go into this offseason. We've mentioned the Wonderlic before. It's like the aptitude test that they take during the combine. John Urschel, the theoretical mathematician, scored a 43. Ryan Fitzpatrick, famously another Harvard man, he scored a 48. To this day, Pat McInally is the only publicly known perfect 50 score in Wonderlic test history.
So you're saying he's a nerd?
Much like John Urschel, he's got a foot in both worlds, nerd and jock. He is going to get scouted ahead of the 1975 draft. This is still a 17-round draft, by the way. And there are a couple people from the 17th round that make the league, which is wild. But all the way at the beginning, we've got Steve Bartkowski going to the Atlanta Falcons first overall. Walter Payton goes third overall. 4 rounds later, in the 5th round, we get to Pat McInally. He is taken 120th overall by the Cincinnati Bengals, which is almost as sad as getting drafted by the Sacramento Kings. It's the football version of getting drafted by the Sacramento Kings.
This is our second Cincinnati discussion, though.
Well, before we get to Cincinnati, we have to go somewhere else in the Midwest. In 1975, he participates in the Chicago College All-Star Game, which is basically the way we used to answer the question that we nowadays have when we wonder, could Alabama beat the Browns in a game? They would get a college all-star team, and they would play one NFL team. This went for 41 total years. This is the second to last every year. 1976 will be the last. NFL teams go 39-2 in the history of this. So they do lose 9 times to the college players. That is the Packers twice, Washington twice, and then the Rams, Bears, Lions, Browns, they all lose once. That's 8. The 9th, Diaz, I am sorry to say that in 1950, the college all-stars beat the Philadelphia Eagles 17-7.
Jets never lost to these college all-stars.
They did not, nor did the Baltimore Colts. We've got that.
I do want to say conceptually, this should exist in every sport. In place of an all-star game, because you need stakes, right? And the stakes here are fuck these new guys coming in, think that they're going to do something in our league. There's something there. And you get to see how the top guys coming out immediately stack up. I think there's a lot to it.
There's definitely a lot to it, but part of the reason that this is the second to last year is the other risk that you run with this, because Pat McInally suffers a terrible leg injury during this game while stretching out for a touchdown in an eventual 21-14 loss. Pat McInally, in fact, is going to miss his entire 1975 rookie season with the Cincinnati Bengals, which is a bummer because they really wanted him to add to that wide receiver corps, and he's going to miss some development time on that. Which is additionally a bummer because a scout told him that day, look, you had a great game as a receiver, but you will never punt in the NFL. He says bet, and despite that, comes back in 1976. He's healed up now, comes to training camp, wins the competition in camp against incumbent Dave Green. He becomes the starting punter now for the Cincinnati Bengals, which does allow Dave Green to get a fun little historical nugget. He goes to the Buccaneers and becomes one of the very last dual punters and place kickers. That's not Pat McInally. Pat McInally, when he's there for special teams, he is there to punt. And from 1976 to 1981, he's a very good punter. Not like the greatest, not the worst, just a very good punter. 20,000 or so total yards. He averages 41.9667 yards per punt, which if you round it up, is 42.0, which is very nice.
The joys of rounding.
I'm going to 4 different decimal places there. I wanted to make sure it was earned, and I think it is. What he earns is the league lead in average punting in 78 and in 81. In 81, he also makes the Pro Bowl, makes first team All-Pro. That is the year that the Bengals actually make Super Bowl 16. They do lose to the Niners, despite outgaining them by almost 100 yards because there are 4 turnovers. Wow. Cincinnati Bengals. He also, during this time, for what's worth, he does go 3 for 4 as a passer with 81 yards. That 20.2 yards per attempt, if he had enough attempts to qualify, would be the NFL record. However, he's not doing that much. What he is doing from 76 to 81, the reason I picked that range specifically, is after taking a year with 76 still recovering to just punt, he is also serving as a wide receiver on this team that entire time. From 77 to 81, 57 total receptions, 808 yards, 5 touchdowns. It's just like a respectable weapon that can come out every once in a while on the line to give people a spell. That 81 season is his last year as a receiver. He does still get to keep the 87 number, though, as a punter. He is allowed to maintain that his entire last couple of years there as just a punter. Drops just enough with his punting that unfortunately his career average ends at 41.9, which was devastating to me to learn. But it's, a pretty solid career all in all. He's been out there from 76 to 85 when he retires. I don't have exact contract figures. What I found was the average NFL salary in 1975 was $56,000. In 1985, we're talking $198,000. You figure a good punter's probably making pretty close to league average. You average all that together, we're looking at about $1.25 to $1.5 million career earnings as an NFL player. So why am I talking about him here in Bag Getters? Well, we're moving on to his next period of life. He's just married actress Leslie Beavis. She is best known for 3 episodes on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where she is Captain Rionoj, a female Boslik freighter captain. She's also in Spaceballs.
I really wanted her to be in Beavis and Butthead. I thought that was going to be
No, she's not in that. She is taking a very important place in their life. She learns from Pat McInally's dad how he likes to have the ball snapped for practicing punting. Apparently, 12 out of the 14 days of their honeymoon to the island of Kauai in Hawaii, they practice punting just to make sure he's staying fresh. They move back home. They're going to move out of Cincinnati, go to Southern California, where he's from, back to the OC.
What you say?
And while he is selling their old apartment, turns out this guy he's talking to, Bruce Stein, he is an executive for a company called Kenner. If you guys aren't familiar with Kenner, that's the company that made the Star Wars action figures, which if you're familiar, merchandising earlier in regards to Spaceballs, that's how George Lucas made millions of dollars, is the merchandising of Star Wars. Supposedly, George Lucas made so much money from just the merchandising that he was able to fully finance episodes 5 and 6 with just the toy sales during that time. But we're in 1985 now. Return of the Jedi came out in 1983, so toy sales have slowed a little bit. They're looking for the next big thing. And while Stein and McInally are talking together, McInally has this light bulb moment that boils down to 3 words. Why not athletes? This brings us to the bag that is about to get secured by Pat McInally, and that is the one that is attached to a little toy line called Starting Lineup. Now, is this something you guys are familiar with?
Well, I know, so there would be a series. It'd be 7 or 8 players each year would get basically an action figure that was just them in uniform.
Yeah, as you get there later, those installments of 7, 8, we're going to talk a little bit about their release strategy, because what you're describing sounds like a really good, sustainable toy line, right? And they maybe don't do the best job with this, but they do get a lot of money. Like the Star Wars figures, these are just incredibly cheap action figures, exactly as you said. They're being sold for about $4.99 for most of them. That's like $12.50 nowadays. And what they do is they release an enormous first set. They don't do an NHL one initially, but they have MLB, NFL, and NBA all counted together. They release 124 MLB players, 137 NFL players, and 85 NBA players for a total of 346 in their first set. It's a very large number. It is a very great snapshot in time. I pulled a couple examples to explain that to us, because you're going to get some stars that catch on, but maybe it's a year where Bobby Bonilla and Barry Bonds are 2 equally good players and they go in opposite directions. So in Baltimore, you've got, we're sticking in baseball here for a second, Cal Ripken. You've also got Mike Boddicker, who's a good Orioles pitcher, but not much more than that. I also want to bring up your Yankees, Xavier. You've got Don Mattingly. You've also got Dave Righetti, who again, is fine. And then for the Phillies, I pulled Mike Schmidt and Steve Bedrosian, who are both equally important.
Fucking awesome.
He's great. He's not Mike Schmidt is the only thing I'm saying. There is a disparate level of like fame for many of these figurines.
Right. Steve Bedrosian wasn't a choker. That's the main difference between the two.
Beautiful. So here's the thing. I can get some information about the sales for all of this. I can't get too much. So we are going to once again issue a speculation alarm.
Speculation. Speculation. Speculation.
As I take you through the mental math that I have tried to do to figure out roughly what we're looking at for Pat McInally's take. Let's go back to George Lucas there for one moment. Supposedly, he financed those second two movies, Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, with just toy sale money. If that's true, Empire Strikes Back, it's made for about $30.5 million. From 1977 to 1980, the 3 years in between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, they make about $300 million in Kenner toy sales. So conservatively, George Lucas is a 10% take there. The deal that Pat McInally supposedly has with Kenner is very similar to the George Lucas one in terms of percentages. So we'll assume that George Lucas made no other money and that they have the exact same percentages. Just give Pat McInally 10%. Starting lineup, we're back out of speculation now. Starting lineup, it's going to burn quite brightly, but not too long because they do kind of blow their load a little early. The Star Wars first line has 12 figures, and they eventually end up with either 93 or 96, depending on how you count some of the ones that come with like collectible cards, but are otherwise identical. So they come out with 12 initially versus 346 for starting lineup. Like as they go forward, they make some lines for Hall of Famers. They do some gimmicky ones like the NBA Slam Dunk series where someone will be dunking in their action pose. They do some like standalone helmet lines. But eventually when Hasbro buys Kenner in 1991, they like realize, hey, we have no other notable players really to do at this point. We did them already. We went too quickly. And so they do eventually stick to just a couple small special runs and eventually discontinue in 2001. I do want to point out Pat McInally is not actually a starting lineup figure for an entire decade. He doesn't make it in until the 1997 10th anniversary team, but he does eventually get his own action figure. By that time, we had $700 million in toy sales for the starting lineup series. So if we're again assuming that Pat McInally gets that 10%, $70 million, which if you look at the list of all-time earnings for NFL players in terms of their salaries, falls at 80th all-time of the roughly 25,000 people that have played football to this point. So we're talking about a guy that's being paid on a career scale between Jason Kelce and TJ Watt, just on toy sales that he came up with the idea for and then chilled on. Because that's another thing. Pat McInally, this entire time, is making this passive income. He's got other stuff going on. Here's some of the other grinds that Pat McInally is on to secure that bag. He has done some poetry and music writing for CBS songs. In 1981, he releases a song with a country artist that like is not huge, but it comes out and it's his first release right before they go to Super Bowl 16. So it occupies like a weird cultural space in Cincinnati. And after that, he just becomes a ghostwriter. So he's just writing songs, handing them to other people, and then collecting the royalties for it. This entire time, he is also writing a newspaper column that starts out with the Cincinnati Enquirer called Pat Answers for Kids, which is like a really obnoxious Harvard wordplay that I want to point out for a second. When he's saying Pat Answers there, it's both him and like, it's a short answer. Don't you love that Harvard vocabulary that I have? However, it is apparently such a loved column that it is picked up by King Features and is syndicated in about 100 papers nationwide during that time. He is also a rare book collector who recently sold an Alice in Wonderland at auction that had been owned by the real Alice for $115,000, one of the highest sums for any signed book of that age of all time. So fingers in every single pie, all of it passive income, all of it just stacking in the bank account outside of the eye of Pat McInally, leaving him to do the things that he loves in addition to all this, like founding Good Sports for Life. It's a sports advocacy group that specifically works with very young people and very old people, coaches at a couple schools in the OC.
What you say?
In 2016, he is inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. And then in 2017, the Hasbro starting line trademark lapses, and a memorabilia manufacturer, Legacy One, starts making new ones that have come out as like giveaways in stadiums now. So he's getting royalties for that once again. The last incredibly guy thing that this incredibly guy dude, Pat McInally, has done he actually just this last year retired from high school coaching, and succeeding him as the head coach is his son, Jack McInally, who he had previously hired as the offensive coordinator and now will be one of the youngest high school football coaches in OC history.
What you say?
Just, I love the McInally family. I love Pat McInally. He has said for a long time, I'm not a football player. I'm a person playing football. And I want to say, in addition to that, Pat McInally, you're selling yourself short. I think you are also a guy.
I mean, it really adds to his resume that he chose to name his son Jack, because then we get the name Jack McInally, which is just a really fun name to say.
The second best Jackie Mac in sports today.
Now, McMullen usually gives Embiid his credit, so she's not on my shit list, despite being a Boston person.
Well, that is my guy, and that brings us to our dark duty as the Guy-bunal. It is time for us to, for the first time in a while, consult with one another and decide which of these fine fellows is due for induction into our hall. I gotta say, here's an early thing for Brian Grant for me. If I may kick it off, there is one thing I like about Brian Grant. I'm not even saying that I'm leaning towards Brian Grant, but I do love how much he got paid to play with his very large contracts, and also how much he got paid to not play with all of his different waived contracts. In the spirit of this category, that does go a long way for me. I'm still pretty even between all of them, but that's a big one for Brian Grant.
He did make around like $30 million not playing.
Well, and that's the one thing that I love about all three of our guys is it's one thing to get, like, teach a man to get a bag, and he'll have a bag for a day. Show a man how to create bags.
This is how you make new bags.
And he will receive bags for the rest of his life. I didn't say that great, but I hope the listeners understand the intent I'm going for. It's one thing to just get that one lump sum payment, but these are all three guys that found ways to make money longer term while not playing. And I think that's a really impressive thing that we just love to see.
Bobby Bonilla directly benefiting from how good Bernie Madoff was at lying is pretty excellent.
The degrees of separation there, where, there's not all losers in the Bernie Madoff story, right? Like, there is the Bobby Bonillas of the world. So, some people made out pretty good.
I mean, pretty much everyone that hates the Mets made out pretty great in the whole Bernie Madoff saga.
It's been a good 30 years of being alive and hating the Mets.
The only negative I would even have about Bobby Bonilla is that he's too well known. But we've kind of gone away from being too good to be a guy or too well known to be a guy at this point. So I can't even use that. I can't even really use that as anything negative.
I think it's interesting that he's so specifically not known for his play. Like, I knew he was good. He had to be good to get that contract. But we're talking about a guy that's on a team with Barry Bonds and is still getting national press for up until that Mets contract, how good he is. And sure, he falls off a cliff then. But, it's all about perception at that time, and that he sold the image of himself as a, $6.3 million man at that point. And shouts to him and his agent again, though. Here's the biggest thing I'm going to say against Brian Grant and Bobby Bonilla. Agents are going to have played a lot into those bags. Now, I'm sure there was some legal help on Pat McInally's side. I'm sure he had some people draw up paper. But at the end of the day, Pat McInally greased that palm right there with Bruce Stein and made that starting lineup series happen.
See, I'm kind of leaning that way too, just because Bobby Bonilla, even if he's not as well known for his actual skill on the baseball diamond at this point, the category was bag getters, and everyone knows him as a bag getter. McInally, he found a way to get the bag in a way that is no one would expect for what he did, and I like the unexpected bag getting.
Well, what I love about McInally is the fact that there's been one perfect Wonderlic score in the history, and it's him. The ability to distill a guy into a singular fact that would make any sports fan go, wow, that's pretty cool. I think that's a very important thing of a guy, and certainly applies with McInally.
Also wild that the greatest wide receiver in Harvard history is an NFL punter.
Made a lot of money through figures.
And it's like his story for his punting journey is like almost a little like Michael Jordan-esque. Wasn't given the opportunity in high school until later, finally earned it, and then ascends to, for a time at least, be one of the best punters in the NFL.
There was never a question that he was good. He didn't like stick around until he was ineffective or anything. He was at all times a good punter. I feel like we're going too harsh on Bonilla here, and I'm very glad to hear the pro Pat McInally sentiment, and I want to come back to this pro Pat McInally sentiment in just a moment. But I do want to say just one last time, I don't think we should be penalizing a guy who every July 1st we've all, as a weird sports community, think about for a singular day together. There is a beauty in that. And perhaps because real litigation will be, close to that time, that might be a better time to bring him up. In fact, that actually brings me to my final point that I want to make for Pat McInally. I had saved this in case you guys hadn't already been swung over. But as I hear this wave of positive sentiment, I'm glad that we're considering Pat now and not trying to kick him down the line, because there's one last thing I want to share. Because we are inducting him before May 7th of this year, we will be inducting Pat McInally into the Hall of Guy at the ripe old age of 69.
Okay, that is nice.
It is a tremendous opportunity that you've presented to us, and we can't look a gift 69 in the mouth. We just need to get in there.
Where is the mouth on a gift 69? Which mouth, I guess, is the question.
At the 6.
That's for the viewers to decide. Ugh.
6 walks in and just sees 7 there under the bed sheets instead.
Well, before we devolve too much further into the sexualization of numbers.
Yes, I'm sorry. We have honors to give out.
Well, with it being unanimous in the view of this hall, it is our great privilege to welcome in and induct a man who got a perfect score on the Wonderlic, the only man to ever do so. A man that kept having his punter opportunities punted down the line, but once he got them, eventually proved himself to be very worthy. A guy that very well could have been one of the greatest wide receivers in NFL history had he not broken his leg in a meaningless preseason game. A guy that saw it fit to honor so many of his fellow guys in the sports world with the action figure collection line. A great guy uplifts other guys, and there's no doubt that Pat McInally has done that and will continue to do that as an incredible steward at the ripe old age of 69. Nice. In our Hall of Guy.
Welcome, Pat McInally, who, in addition to his potential as a receiver, I'll just mention one more time, like that 20.2 yards per attempt, if he had enough attempts to qualify, NFL record by an absolute country mile.
An efficiency king, the Nikola Jokic of quarterbacks.
Well, now, okay, before we insult Pat McInally here, Diaz, let's take a moment to congratulate him once more and thank everyone that needs to be thanked. I'd like to thank my partners in crime as we kick off another phenomenal season of Remember That Guy. I would like to thank the coders behind Craigbot, who helped make Remember That Guy possible, as well as our musical director, Don Ham. And of course, we'd like to thank you, dear listener. If you are perhaps looking for more guys, if a Monday fix is not enough for you during the week, perhaps check out the Twitter, where we have resurrected our Guy of the Day feature. In fact, you can check out everything that is related to our show whatsoever at bit.ly/Remember That Guy, all one word, all lowercase. We got stickers on there now. If you want a sticker, go ahead and click through to the link and get us your shipping, and we will get that sent right over to you. If you like the show, rate, review, and as always, word of mouth is the best sponsor. But that's all that I have to say right now. Anything for you guys on the way out?
Don't watch Match of the Day. If you are friends across the pond, don't watch Match of the Day tomorrow.
Tomorrow being Tuesday.
Oh wait, yeah, never mind. Cut that out.
Hopefully you didn't watch Match of the Day. If you did, it's already too late.
The BBC was very racist and sidelined their main analyst for pointing out that right-wing anti-immigration policies were bad and that shouldn't be acknowledged as a proper way of even handling things. So they sidelined him, and now every single soccer commentator who's usually on has said, "Hey, fuck you, BBC, we're not going on." And other soccer players are trying to get people just, "Hey, don't watch tomorrow." because it's bad. But that would be Saturday, so it would have already happened.
Well, to our very American audience, I sincerely hope that you resisted the, I know, overwhelming weekly urge to watch soccer. And if you did, you know what? If you didn't know that, that's okay. We forgive you. We love you because you came and listened to us, and we thank you for taking the time to do that. We hope you'll do it again. But until then, I've been James.
I've been the very special guest, Xavier.
And I'm Diaz. And as Tyler Durden once said, the first rule of Guy Club is you do not talk about Guy Club.
Hey, Diaz. I want to pose exactly one question from the Wonderlic to you all that was shared, specifically the one that he took that year. Is 11 p.m. before or after midnight?
Before.
Well,
technically it's after. Because if you're talking about in a day, midnight of this day was like 18
I don't know.
ago.
When I say midnight, I'm talking about midnight of the upcoming midnight and not previous midnight.
Well, that's why you didn't get a perfect 50 on the Wonderlic, Xavier.